Hello, Siska and Olov, and welcome to this little interview about the Queerlit Project. Before we start, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, hi, glad to be here. I'm Olov Kriström, a librarian working in Gothenburg, Sweden. Within the Queerlit Project, I've been managing the creation of the thesaurus and is working on indexing the literature as well.
Hi, my name is Siska Humlesjö. I'm the project assistant and systems librarian for the Queerlit Project. I also work here at Gothenburg University with Olov. Besides taking care of project assistant stuff, I also index the literature in the project and work with the infrastructure behind the scenes.
Thank you. And my name is Cora, or Korilka Golub. I'm a professor in information studies at Linnaeus University, and I coordinate the Dimpah project, as part of which this interview is being recorded. So, could you tell us something more about the Queerlit project itself? What is it about? What is the rationale?
Yeah, Queerlit is a project, a research infrastructure project managed by the Gothenburg University Literary Institution. But we have collaborations with people working in Växjö and Stockholm as well. The aim of the project is to make Swedish fiction with LGBTQI themes more searchable and more findable in the library catalogs. So we will be creating a subset of the National Library Database, Libris, where we will be gathering works of fiction, Swedish works of fiction, with LGBTQI themes. And we'll also be creating a thesaurus to ascribe subject headings for these works. And also, as a third part of the project, create a separate interface, our own website, where the literature will be searchable in slightly different ways than the main national catalog. And the reason for the project is queer or LGBTQI fiction is oftentimes forgotten, not highlighted, and difficult to find. Historically, it's often written in sort of coded language, metaphors, not explicit, like this is a book about a lesbian couple. So we have to search the subtext. And that has been done to some extent, both by researchers and in community reading groups. And we're using this both the research knowledge and the community knowledge as a pool of gathering all these separate works together to make them more findable.
Thank you. And why are existing subject indexing systems, for example, general subject headings that we also use in Sweden, like Swedish subject headings, not enough to help index and therefore find LGBTQI fiction?
When it comes to the mostly used subject heading system in Sweden, Swedish subject headings, Svenska ämnesord, it consists about 40,000 terms. And depending on how you define LGBTQI themes, around 80 or 150 terms could be said to be LGBTQI terms. These are, of course, very broad, since the system is supposed to be applicable to all knowledge. So that means that they are very broad. So to define specific terms, like, for example, a trans woman, That is not a subject heading in the Swedish subject heading systems. Also, we use linked data, which makes it possible to update the terms depending on how the terminology changes over time. And it makes it possible for us to have several terms for the same subject heading. So you can use your own terminology and still find the works that are of interest to you. When it comes to the LGBTQI terms, we have to find terms that is more about the practice. What are you doing? Not the identity, which has been the way to identify people in the previously used systems. You have a lesbian, but you don't have two moms, or you don't have two women kissing and such. And since it's fiction, often we cannot use these identity terms because it isn't, fiction is more abstract than non-fiction works. And also we can use some ways to apply terms when it comes to character, which only take a small part in the work of fiction.
Thank you. And there are a lot of discussions in the knowledge organization community about social tagging or collaborative tagging or folksonomies. Could they help in some way with indexing LGBTQI fiction, or do they come with more sort of problems than solutions? What do you think?
I would say both yes and no. It's both helpful and problematic in some ways. It's helpful in the way that it's a good way to stay up to date with the terminology that people use, like the current lingo, if you like, and so you don't use outdated terms or terms that people start to find problematic. It's also really good with user tagging, social tagging, in that the people who have actually read the books can say something about it, because catalogers, librarians oftentimes don't have the time to read an entire book to find out what it's really about. So you can get more depth in the indexing and find these peripheral themes. But it's also problematic, of course, since it's the resulting subject headings isn't a controlled vocabulary, so you can't have consistency in indexing or create structured relationships between the terms in an easy way, at least. And also, when you don't have a controlled vocabulary, you can't update the terms. So at the same time as social tagging is a way to stay current, to stay up to date. Once the tags are applied, of course, they age. So what was up to date in social tagging 15 years ago may be outdated now. And if it's not a controlled vocabulary, it's more difficult to update, I would say.
Thank you. And then similarly, everybody's using search engines and automatic text indexing to find information. To what degree does automated subject indexing work for fiction in general, and specifically for LGBTQI fiction? Does it work at all?
We have tried to find any examples of it working, or even tried and haven't found any. When it comes to automated indexing for fiction, most of the trials has been on large sums of genre fiction, for example, Western novels. And when it comes to those large sets, then you can identify things like place and time, and maybe some of the main themes, like it's a cowboy, it's on the prairie and such. But when it comes to these more subtle themes, like the LGBTQI themes in older fiction, we haven't found any examples of it being tried. And I would say that it probably, as the technology is today, it wouldn't work.
Thank you. And then, since the thesaurus is about terms and concepts, how do you go about in the Queerlit project about learning about which concepts and terms to include in the thesaurus?
Yeah, we started as a sort of foundation for the work with the thesaurus. We used an international English language thesaurus that already existed, the Homosaurus, which was created by a Dutch library in collaboration with the Transgender Digital Archive. And they've been very active in working on making the subject headings inclusive with trans issues, with queer issues. So they have a quite active board of updating the Homosaurus. So it was a good foundation, but of course it needed to be applied to Swedish circumstances. And we also, within the Queerlit project, have an advisory board with literary scholars, librarians, people working with the literature more in depth. And they've been giving inputs on what terms they would like to see, both to make research possible, what are the research interests, and also what terms are most accurate. We've also been working with workshops to the public, inviting people during Pride events, for instance, both to help with finding the literature, finding the books that go into the database, but also working with the subject headings. What terms would they like to see? What terms do they find most useful? And also with librarians, we've been working with workshops.
Excellent, thank you. And the final question, once you will have built the Queerlit thesaurus, how do you make sure that everything that it has to offer to the end user is actually implemented? Or how can the user get most of the thesaurus? What would be the role of the search interface or browse interface?
We are working with the interface right now and are planning to release it in February 2023. In our own interface, we make it possible to search for these peripheral themes in a more intuitive way. In the Union Catalog Libris, it isn't possible at all right now. We also highlight the subject headings in a way that we hope will be more intuitive to the user, and we also plan to test it with users and with our advisory board to see how it works. It will be possible to browse the titles, hopefully, through specific subject headings. We mainly use the APIs from the Union Catalog to make this possible, and this is also a way for them to have their interface or their APIs and technical solution tested for real with a real project. So hopefully the interface will make it more intuitive for the user to search Also to get combine subject headings, time and such, to make it as usable as possible for mainly the researchers, but also for the general public.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions so wonderfully, and thank you for telling us about your really interesting project, and best of luck. I look forward to the results of the project, to enjoy them soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.